تغني عنهم أموالهم ولا أولادهم من الله شيئا وأولئك أصحاب النار هم فيها خالدون. Indeed, those who disbelieve, their wealth and their children shall avail them not in regards to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And indeed, those are the dwellers of the hellfire. They will dwell therein forever. So the ayah starts off by mentioning those who deny Allah. Kafaru, of course, we know is a verb, a verbal pattern of kufr, that those who deny Allah's existence, those who deny the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that is to say that to not accept the nubuwah, that is to not accept that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a prophet of God. Also, anyone who denies the details of what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught, namely what we call the maghibat or the sam'iyat, that is that particular issues which cannot be known to human beings relying on their normal paths of learning and knowledge, that is empirical knowledge, what we acquire through our sense perception, and even knowledge that is relegated to our intellect, that through logic alone, if you will, pure reason, we arrive at certain principles and certain ideas. If there are certain realities that are beyond the scope of both of these things, and these realities we only know because we were informed of them, then those are called the sam'iyat. Hence the word sam'iyat, it comes from sama, something that we have heard. So if you take that definition and you understand from it that it is a very general and broad way of saying that anything that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and rather all the Anbiya alayhi wasallam, every prophet from the beginning to the end, from Adam alayhi salam to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that whatever they had taught in detail of those particular issues, again, that we do not know, using just alone our own regular methods of acquiring knowledge, then that is what we call sam'iyat. But this is important because these three subjects, it forms the entirety of our i'tiqad, or our creed. More importantly, also we say this is called usuluddin, meaning this is the very essence and the epitome, if you will, of our religion. That is, that the religion is pivoted first upon the iman and acceptance of these realities. The first is Allah himself, his existence, his attributes. The second is the concept of prophethood. So it's not just about knowing particular individuals, because we also know that the Quran has not named every prophet. So we don't have to know the particulars about individuals. What we do have to know is there's a phenomena called prophethood, that certain human beings are chosen by the Creator to become literally messengers, that they relay from God to his creation. They relay information, they relay commandments, and so forth and so on. That is called nubuwah. So there's nobody who would deny that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam existed historically as a figure. There are many people who deny that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a prophet. That's why we say Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So a kafir, one who denies, is not just one who denies the existence of God or a creator. So you have to go down to each issue. The kafir is one who denies God, and even in the denial of God, it is not just that they say there is no creator. They may acquiesce that there's a creator, but they don't acquiesce to whom that creator is, and also the qualities of that creator. So as an example, if a person believes that their creator is a man or a human being, then this is kufr. And that's why it's necessary to learn our aqidah properly, so we know when and where, that it's not just enough for a person to say that they believe there's a creator, but part of belief in Allah is to understand and know whom Allah is, what is necessary. In other words, what rationally, when we say there's a creator, what are the necessary qualities that the creator must possess? Otherwise, it is irrational to say that that thing or that being is a creator. As an example, having no beginning, having no end, having absolute knowledge, having absolute power, so forth and so on. Those are some of the necessary qualities of Allah Jalla Jalaluhu. That has to be known. So then also when we look at people, all of the different ideas that we have out there in the world, that what are they saying exactly, and whether that is considered iman or kufr. So if they do say there's a God or creator, it's not always sufficient. What exactly do they say about God? What exactly do they say about their creator? And the same thing goes for prophethood. So in prophethood too, it's not enough just to acknowledge an individual or an historical figure. It is the essence of iman is to acknowledge their prophethood. So if someone says, as an example, and that has levels too of what they deny and what they don't. So if someone says an example that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I believe that he was a prophet, but I think his prophethood was relegated to the Arabs only. That's kufr. That is denial of a fact. Because the Quran itself does not make such a claim, neither did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam make such a claim. He did himself claim to be a prophet for all of mankind. The Quran also makes this clear. So to deny that is also kufr. So we're just going through what exactly does it mean, kafaru? Who are those people who deny? And taking it even further, the sam'iyat, that the details of what the Prophet taught, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there can be people that even claim to be Muslim, that they say the first two things they will say in general, maybe even they don't have knowledge of those details either, but they'll say in general, I believe in Allah. Although sometimes for many people who are Muslim, if you ask them the details of that, what does that entail? Who is Allah? You'd be very hard pressed to find Muslims who can actually tell you, unfortunately, the details of what they mean when they say, I believe in Allah. Okay, so who is Allah? Right? If you were asked this question on the street or by your colleagues, right, what would your answer be? Would you just say, well, he's God? Or what sometimes we say because of the particulars of our situation, we will say he's the same God of Abraham, alayhi salam. That's still a very general and very it's not a detailed answer at all. But really you need to be able to give a detailed answer. Well, Allah is that being whose being is absolute, who is unlike anything, who has no beginning, who has no end, who has absolute knowledge, absolute power, who is different from all things in existence, so forth and so on. These are at least that much. If we know that much, then you can give a detailed answer about who Allah is. And so what you're also saying by implication is that anything that does not have these qualifications cannot be Allah. And if they are not Allah, they are not worthy of worship. That is actually what you're saying when you say La ilaha illallah. So it's not just an admission that I say, like, very simply and briefly and in a very generic way, I believe in Allah, which is unfortunately, like I said, many Muslims, that's about as much as they can offer. Why? I believe in Allah. Well, who is Allah, right? So after that too, when you say Muhammadur Rasulullah, you're saying that Muhammad is the prophet. Okay, prophet of what? What does he prophesize, as the word in English entails? That if he's a prophet, he prophesies, he makes prophecies, right? Then yeah, that may be part of what he brought, meaning he did actually have prophecies, right? And he had many detailed prophecies as an example of what will happen in the last days. But that's not all that he did. So then what was his prophethood? It was commandments. It was details of certain issues. As I said, this is the most important part of it, because every prophet, quote unquote, if we use that word as a translation of Anbiya is also a shared word that is used in Hebrew, by the way, from Naba'a, that is to inform. So if Naba'a means to inform and a Nabi is one who informs, it goes back to the original point that I made, that a Nabi informs us of things which we are not able to normally come to a conclusion of their existence or non-existence using the regular methodologies that human beings have even today. With all of our glorious technology and advancements, as we call it, we may be advanced quantifiably, but not not in quality. As people, we're very questionable how much we've advanced, but in terms of quantity, how much we possess of material things, mashallah, right? But even with all of that, we still can only know what is relegated to empirical knowledge through our sense perception, so forth and so on, and from our rationale, from our intellect. So when those things end, prophethood begins. That's part of the reason why the Rasulullah said the beginning of prophethood are true dreams, because the dream state is exactly an indication of that. This is where the normal paths of learning and acquiring knowledge end for human beings, and they are now in a realm where they receive information from where no scientist could even tell you where exactly is this coming from, because you don't have access now to this. Is a different realm, if you will, of existence for human beings, the realm of the soul. So when the information that the prophet begins is where our information ends. We have no access anymore, and that's why they're called Nabi, one who informs. In other words, informs us of things that we could not normally acquire on our own. So what are those things? That's the very important part of that implication. All these words and these definitions imply things. The implication being that prophets inform you of things that you could not know. That's why the first thing I said is commandments. How can you speak on behalf of God? Did God speak to you? Do you have some access to God? And if you have access to God, as we said, if God, and He is, has no beginning, has no end, has no relation to anything in creation, because even all the information that we have now that's empirical, it is all based on our observation of created things. Observation. Even the word itself comes from the ability to see. What does Allah say about Himself? لا تدركه الأبصار. That sight cannot reach Him. So how can this knowledge that you base off of what you can see reach to the knowledge of Allah when Allah cannot be seen? Logical question for y'all, right? Not possible. So then how can you speak on behalf of God, who is so sublime and so exalted that is not like anything? So you can't even take what you do know, because Allah says He is not like anything. So what you do know, you cannot thereafter make a conclusion and say that Allah is like this or Allah is like that, because there's nothing like Allah. So then where will you go? فَأَيْنَ تَذْهَبُونَ? Right? Well, there's only one way. That is that when Allah chooses to reveal that knowledge to a person. And in this case, this is what nubuwwah means. And when Allah reveals that knowledge of Himself, His attributes, He reveals also commandments. Because again, how would you be able to arrive to a conclusion, even with the knowledge that we have of the outside world? Science cannot give answers to things like morality. And then especially can't give answers to things like, what can be the end result of particular choices that we make, right? We can never be certain about results, even in the short lifespan that we have. So as a very simple example, most of us will go to college expecting that college will give us a degree, expecting that the degree will give us a good career. But none of that is really guaranteed. There are plenty of people who go to college and get a degree and don't use it and end up just being in debt. So the results are never guaranteed from any of our efforts or the knowledge that we assume that we know that something will happen. The results of this, of our actions and decisions, will be this. Human beings are shown this every day, that we are very, very, very short-sighted. So even in our everyday mundane affairs, we don't know enough to guarantee anything. And if you look at us again in all of our glory, what does Allah do? He sends a novel coronavirus just to teach us that as much as we think we know and we can control things, we are not in control and we don't know. So even in our mundane affairs and dunyawiyya affairs, no matter how much we think we know, we have a limit. So if that's the case, how could we possibly again speak on behalf of God, saying that we know for sure what God commands and what God prohibits, and why God commands and why God prohibits? So it does take a certain amount of humility for a human being to say that, no, how could I possibly know that? So what does Allah do? He chooses people, and in that it itself is a test. So Allah says that He knows better where to put this message, in other words, whom to choose as a prophet. And He chooses basis on certain things. No doubt Allah's choices are based on hikmah. His ikhtiyar is always based on some hikmah. Hikmah meaning putting things in their right place. If you understand it from that point of view, that means, again, He knows whom is the real, yani, whom is truly ready to carry this duty of risala. And what would be the absolute necessary qualities of those prophets too is necessary. That's why we say amana, and being trustworthy is one of the most prime qualities of a prophet, because a person chosen for this job can never be a person who is deceitful, right? And so we are, these are certain things everyone must know as a Muslim. So then when Allah chooses, He gives that person information that we cannot acquire. That is, of course, again, like I said, commandments, because how would we know what Allah desires from us in terms of what we should do, what we should not do, especially when most of the time we look at how we are now in the postmodern world. We have just relegated to ourselves to such a state that we believe that as long as we can do something, in other words, as long as we have the freedom to choose, then no choice can be wrong. Except and short of, now we're getting to the point of murder, maybe, is the only thing that there can be some consensus amongst most people that murder is wrong. But other than that, it's the only basis of our choices is that can it be done? That's the only thing that we think of anymore, that if it can be done, then there is no morality to be asked of whether that thing should be done or not. It's just that if it can be done, then the principle is you have the freedom to do it, and then no one can question you whether you should do it or not. We're we're saying that consequences of our actions are not known to us, either in this world or the akhirah. And the proof is in the pudding, as I said, very simple examples that you can use in your own experiences, that you're not always aware of the ultimate result of your actions and your consequences of your choices. So then when God reveals these things, He reveals these things in terms of orders, al-awamir, and also, and because of that, the other details that are relegated to that, because Allah Ta'ala is trying to give us a reality that is beyond even the here and now, and that's what's called al-akhirah. Because ad-dunya can also be dunu, which is in front of you at the moment, and al-akhirah is what comes after, and that again is something we have no idea of. But kufr, to deny, kafaru, those people who deny, are also people who deny those things, meaning the morality taught by the prophets, the commandments and the prohibitions, and the realities that they teach of the consequences of our actions, what we call al-akhirah. That is part of the details that they give. If a person denies that, then they are also considered a kafir. Now, where that becomes scary is a person can claim, I believe in Allah, and I believe in Muhammad was the messenger of Allah. But I deny now the details of what he brought, meaning I deny his commandments, I deny his prohibitions, I deny his teachings of what will be the results and consequences of our actions in the akhirah. That is also kufr, even if you're claiming in general that I believe in Allah and I believe in Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that's why it's important to know. فَاعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهُ. Know exactly what it is that you're claiming. This is not just some generic and general claim that, yes, I believe in Allah, I believe in Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But there is an implication to all of this. So even one denial of one thing that is known, meaning it is known by everyone that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught this, denial of that is also akin to kufr, no matter what the person claims. And also denial of what is known of the details of the akhirah is also akin to kufr. All right, no matter what the person claims. Now, again, we can academically break down which of those issues are categorically definitive, and we cannot deny them, and the denial is akin to kufr, and what are not. This is neither the time or place to do that. But all I'm trying to get you to understand is that the word here, kafaru, it is not so easy just to say that kufr is just one particular thing. Kufr is a denial of any of those three realities that we must accept at any stage. So those who deny these things, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that no matter what they have of wealth and children, it will not help them at all. I kind of made it fancy, it will avail them not, whatever. But it means, tughni ijna, means to make someone literally ghani. And ghani and ghina in Arabic is not just wealth. Normally we would say wealth because the idea of having ghina in Arabic is that you have enough wealth that you're not worried about your needs. Okay, that's the literal meaning of al-ghina, meaning that, like what we say here, I'm struggling, right? So someone who's struggling It means that they're worried that they're going, where are they going to get their next paycheck to pay for their food or to pay for their rent, right? So a person who basically doesn't worry about those things, no matter how much wealth they have, which is interesting. It's not like here where we have everything, right? Everything is down to the T. Like a certain amount of income is considered poverty level, middle class, upper middle class, and so forth and so on. In the Arabic language, that wasn't the concept. It doesn't matter how much, really, it's enough wealth that if you're not worried about your needs, you are ghani. Because the literal meaning of ghani means I don't need anything. So the moment that you have this fear, that you're in faqr. Faqr literally means to be in need. That, oh, I don't have enough. What will I do now to be able to bring food to the table or to be able to pay rent? That's faqr, that's poverty. Whereas wealth, okay, no matter how much it is when a person is able to take care of their needs without worry. Interestingly enough, the Prophet ﷺ, sometimes he did this, which is important because it shows that he came to change people's worldview. And even if it means changing the language itself, even the Arabic language. So the word as-salah, for instance, in the Arabic language means literally dua, supplication. It's not any particular way of supplicating. So the Prophet ﷺ taught us that we make salah in this particular form, thereby even changing the word and its implication in the Arabic language. So it is a
Imam, can I ask a question?
Sure.
So, maybe you can argue that other than the existence of God, we talk about everything else has to be taught to man. So,
yes.
so for example, the prophethood of our prophet is something that needs to be taught. And that is really a big responsibility on people, much more other people than it is, for example, me, who was brought up every day you hear the prophet's name, right? So for example, that person living in Alabama, right, who they're inundated with false information, living in an environment where, first of all, the prophet's name is, every single time, 99.9% of the time it's mentioned, it's clouded in negative.
Yes, correct.
That seems to me, it's very different than God, right? We talk about, well, if you put someone in a cave and you sit him alone, eventually he can come to the conclusion, like Hazrat Ibrahim, looking at the moon, looking at the sun. But how is that person supposed to come to the knowledge of our prophet?
Okay, so that's a good question, because first of all, the difference between that person and a person, like you said, who is living in a cave, as the statement of Al-Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala about that type of person who is not living amongst people, okay? And I'm saying that in a very general way, because we're not just talking about living in a civilized, living in civilization. They're just not around people, period, right? So that person who has access to creation and is able to ponder, as you said, they can look at the stars and everything around them. They can come to a very simple conclusion that there's a creator, right? So according to Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala, that person is exonerated. Okay? Now, these people you're talking about, even if they're in Alabama or Wyoming or wherever, right? And they're not, let's say, they don't, I would say, see, here's the thing. Let's talk about those people in particular. They, first of all, they do live in what we would call a civilization, right? Even if they're not living in the cities, it doesn't matter. They're still part of what we call that civilization. Or let's say here in the United States of America, they're part of this country, they're part of this society. And they're also living in the 21st century, which is what we call the information age, okay? So even if that information is, like you said, 90% negative, then there's only two ways to understand this problem, because there's two solutions to it. One is to say, which is the Ash'a'ira, that is a very particular school of thought, right? They say that, well, a person like that is not responsible because the information that is relayed to them is faulty information, okay? So how can they make a proper conclusion? The other way is the Maturidiyya, who will say that, well, they're still able to question the information that is brought to them. Okay, especially now when half of that crowd will say that everything is fake news anyhow. Well, what about your news? Could that not possibly be fake as well? You understand? So there's still the moral obligation to say, okay, well, if there's 1 billion people on earth who claim that this man was a prophet, should I not hear their explanation or their side and their side of the story?
Yeah, you know.
And again, in this, we're not being definitive. Okay, we're just saying these are the plausible options here. That either maybe Allah will not hold them to account because they are, they're not getting any information that's really reliable, or Allah Ta'ala may still hold them to account because maybe there was something deep inside their consciousness that should have motivated them to say, well, maybe I should question the information coming to me and listen to the other side.
What is our belief that Allah makes the first step towards that person, or that person needs to make the first step?
Well, ultimately, okay, now we're getting down to the layers of there's always layers of reality, right? So there's certain things that are obvious. They're about what we see around us in the world, and there's certain things that are the more subtle they're the more if you will, there's the things that we don't always can appreciate at face value, called daqa'iq, right? They're the subtler aspects of things, if you will. So when you break it down, everything around us, then you're breaking it down to the level where basically you're shedding the outward and you're getting to the crux of the matter, which is ultimately everything is from Allah. And if Allah wants to guide someone, then He'll do so. Okay, you see what I'm saying? Ultimately, ultimately, Allah will create the conditions in that person. So, for instance, take that example: a person living in wherever, Alabama, Wyoming, whatever place we decided to pick on.
Yes.
and they're just watching Fox News or whatever,
right.
And their pastor is like, hates Muslims, and every day he's saying something disparaging of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay. Now, if Allah wants good for them, you can take two sides of our viewpoint, like Ashad Asha'ira and Maturidiyya, like what will Allah do to them? And both of them are not definitive. Maybe Allah will hold them accountable, maybe not. But let's put it this way, going down to the next layer, that Allah guides whom He wants. Would Allah, if He wants good for that person, not create in them even the question, meaning would He not even touch the heart of that individual to question what he's hearing, whether from Fox News or their pastor?
Yes.
Had this not happened to the companions in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who is it that I'm trying to remember his name? When I'll get this later. It's in a book. That's why we have books. They remind us when we forget. There was one companion who right now I can't recall their name, but when they came to make Hajj, this was during the Meccan period where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was still giving dawah and being persecuted. So by then, many Arab tribes have already heard of him. Okay. And they have obviously heard of him in a very negative light, because the Quraysh were spreading nothing but rumors and just, again, like Fox News, they had nothing good to say about him. So when he arrived at Mecca, when he was about to go in the Haram, the Quraysh again took the opportunity to remind him that we had this crazy person, astaghfirullah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who's telling people lies, and if you listen to him, he's going to enthrall you, and he's going to capture your heart, and then you might go astray. So please don't listen to this man. That was exactly what they told him. Right? But the interesting thing about this story is, he said in the beginning, that's why they call him Dhul Qatnayn. He put 2 pieces of cotton in his ears, literally, so that he couldn't hear him if he came across him. That's how worried the Quraysh got him. Okay? That if you just listen to him once, you're done. Right? He's going to lead you astray. So he was so concerned, he put 2 pieces of cotton in his ears so that he couldn't hear the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The interesting thing about this incident is that it's recorded that he said himself that I thought to myself for a second that I'm a grown, intelligent man. I can think for myself. You see that? Meaning Allah Ta'ala created in his heart what? He could have just listened to all the propaganda and went along his way. But instead, Allah Ta'ala created that sentiment in his heart that I'm a grown man and I can think for myself. Why not at least hear what he's got to say?
Right.
And the result of that attitude was that Allah guided him and he became Muslim and he accepted Islam in the hands of the Prophet.
So maybe you can say that, look, if you think, Islam and Allah has to be just, right, and fair.
Right.
So then maybe you could say, well, your ability to think and use your reasoning is the fairness that he's providing.
Exactly. So look at the many ayat that I've repeated many times when we met. Allah will place his punishment upon those people who do not think. Right? If Allah knew that these people had any good in them, he would allow them to hear. Literally, the translation of لَأَسْمَعَهُمْ would be that Allah would allow them even to hear the truth. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
That if Allah knows of them any good, like in this case of this one companion, Allah knows in him some good, so what does he do? He creates that sentiment in him that maybe I shouldn't be listening to everyone anyhow because I can think for myself. So let me at least hear what Muhammad has to say. You see what I'm saying? So
Yes.
In that crowd, whether it's Wyoming, Alabama, Tennessee, or wherever in the red states, right, that we can pick, in that crowd, there will be some individuals that if Allah wants good for them, if Allah knows of good in them, if Allah knows that there's good in them, they will have that sentiment. Allah will create that sentiment in them, and it will make it so strong that they will not be able to deny it. In other words, it won't be just a fleeting thought, but it'll become something that they cannot deny. But maybe I should stop listening to all of this negativity and hear the other side. I'm a grown man or woman, I'm a grown up, I can think for myself. Let me decide for myself. Okay. So
yeah, I think and I think we're fortunate in that sense, because I think expecting people to ask those questions and take the time to answer those questions has been lost. Most people are not doing that. And,
right.
and maybe, and who's to say that we wouldn't, if we were not born in a Muslim family, to take time out and actually ask ourselves these questions and then take the extra step to investigate them.
Right.
It's not an easy thing. I think necessarily when you're just doing the day in and day out things that we always do.
Right. And the scarier, I think what you've just mentioned, the scarier part of that is, which is not talked about a lot amongst Muslims themselves, is that even for Muslims who are born Muslim, quote unquote, to lack a better way of putting it, I would rather say raised Muslim, for very particular reasons, which is a whole other issue, which I talked about briefly before a long time ago, but I don't say that people are born Muslim. People are born with fitrah. Okay, which means they have the ability to accept the truth. They may be raised Muslim. Okay. And that, again, we can discuss in detail. So people are raised Muslim. Let's use the example you just gave. And even for them at times, they're not going to take the time out to actually ask the questions that need to be asked about what they were taught and to seek the truth, right? And it becomes more it becomes even harder here because Islam is the truth. But we can't just make that a truth claim without backing it up with evidence. Okay? So here's the thing. And what I mean by that is that we don't also want people who are raised Muslims to ask questions and become confused, right? But we do make the truth claim that if you're honest and if you want the truth is there to be found, and the truth is Islam. Okay? Inna deena indallahi al-Islam, as we've read in Surah Ale Imran. I mean, the deen with Allah is Islam. So, but the point I'm making with all this is that there's something that most of us don't want to talk about, which is very uncomfortable. It's a very uncomfortable subject for us, and it's related to what you just said, is that even amongst the classical Muslim scholars and theologians, there was always an issue of what they call the iman, that is the faith. If you translate iman as faith, of the muqallid. What they mean by a muqallid here is any individual who bases their faith in Islam upon somebody else. And that's a very general statement. So what do they mean by that? Whether it's their parents, whether it's a teacher, right? A certain individual that they're impressed by, that the reason, in other words, they're Muslim is because these people are Muslim. You got it? Okay, because taqleed literally means just to follow the words or the opinions of someone else without actually asking how they arrived to that opinion. That's the literal meaning of taqleed. Why do I do it? Taqaleed is just following your traditions and your culture. So why do we do this? Well, because this is what we do. There's no reason behind it. You got it? So in other words, if you ask that person, why are they a Muslim? Their response would be, well, I was raised Muslim. Or I'm Muslim because I was really impressed by this one person and I thought that I should do what they do. You got it? So the traditional Muslim theologians, and I literally have, I'm not saying this, may Allah protect me, and this is not like I'm not trying to brag, but I have literally hundreds of books over here in this shelf of the other direction that are just about that subject, okay? of Aqidah. And in each one of those books, you'll find the same discussion. No matter, and you know, and in other words, what I'm saying, I'm not just saying a few people, we're talking about hundreds of years of tradition and learning. The same question came up. And that question again is the same, what I'm mentioning now. It is the faith of that person, that their Iman and their Islam is based on the Iman and Islam of somebody else, and they don't really have any other reason than that I'm Muslim because my parents are Muslim, or I'm Muslim because the Sheikh is Muslim, or I like this person, or nowadays we get a lot of issues in our communities of people like becoming Muslim to get married, right? Right? So their question was always, is that faith valid or not? That's the first point that they made is that faith valid or not? That was the first question. So amongst the Sunni, if you will, paradigm, as you know, however way you want to translate Sunni, let's put it, the Orthodox paradigm, for lack of better words of that regarding that issue, is that their faith may be valid, but they will be sinful. Listen very closely to the point that they will be sinful if they do not ask those questions and make their faith based on reason. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Right.
They themselves will become sinful if they do not go beyond that point and actually ask the questions that you brought up that they should be asking, and now make their faith and their iman not based on the fact that I was raised Muslim, or that I wanted to marry so-and-so, or that such and such a person was so impressive to me that I thought, let me do what they're doing. Now I've asked real questions about life, about the Creator, about all of these things, about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when I got the answers, my faith now is based on knowledge of these things.
Yeah.
And that
so it is an obligation for every human being to think and to ask those questions.
Yes.
And what did our Prophet do for the first, I don't know how many years before he received the first revelation, right? He was going in seclusion and thinking about these questions.
Right.
Is it in your, you could probably give some more insight into this. Is it always first knowing Allah first, and then the sequential step is then knowing the Prophet? Or can it ever happen the other way? Can anyone ever come to the knowledge of Allah through first knowing the Prophet?
Right. There too, it's very interesting that academically speaking, many scholars have had different, I don't want to say different opinions, because again, the result is always the same. Meaning they have to come to the same conclusions. That the three basic conclusions I mentioned before that make our Aqidah and Usuluddin: who is Allah, what is prophethood, who are prophets, and what are the details of the teachings of those prophets, right? Those are the three main categories. How you arrive at that truth, some people had said that it is more important to first concentrate on who Allah is first. Their reasoning would be that once you know who the lawgiver is and who is the one who creates, then it's very easy to know that law and know the ones whom are chosen to give that law, meaning prophethood and so forth and so on. Others would argue that knowing Allah is slightly easier for people to accept. This is so the first camp is that it's more important to learn about Allah first. The second camp, which to say it's more important to learn about prophethood and who the prophet is first, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, their reasoning being is that knowing Allah is a little bit easier for the human mind than understanding the office of prophethood, and also understanding, more importantly, that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the prophet of God. That is a little bit more nuanced, and it takes a little bit more effort. So in their opinion, it's more important first to tackle who is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I lean towards that second opinion a little bit more, only in certain circumstances. And what do I mean by that? Is that when we are living amongst the society where still at least half of the population still believe in some form, in Christianity, okay? So we could call them Ahlul Kitab. And even if they're atheists, they are still at least familiar with the Christian tradition, because we are in the Western world, it's part of a European tradition, so they are at least familiar with Christianity, correct? So based on that, I think it's more important, because of the history of Christianity in Europe, because unlike Christians in the Middle East who had direct contact with Muslims, the Christians in Europe always had a negative idea of who Muhammad is, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. All right, you understand what I'm saying? So for me, I think the second opinion is more important in our context, because really what needs to be done is for these people to be able to understand that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the messenger of Allah. And then from there, everything else will kind of find its way. But again, this is not definitive. You can take either approach. You can take the approach that it's more important for people to first understand whom Allah is, then they can understand who Muhammad is, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Or you can say that the more important approach, or the best suited, not more important, let's say the best suited, right? So because Allah says that we should, call people to Allah, or we should, even if we debate these issues of religion, وَجَادِلْهُمْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. So when you do debate these issues of religion, do it in the way that is best. So ahsan is also not just best in terms of how you say it, or your character when you say it, meaning do you attack people and so forth, but rather also ahsan means the best suited approach. Okay, what is the best suited approach for this particular person or these particular people or society? My opinion would be that, personally, that the second approach is better. Get people first to understand who Muhammad is, and that is based on, like I said, if you go through the history of the Western world and Christianity in the Western world, that they have always been lied to about who Muhammad is. Whereas in places like the Middle East and North Africa, where Christians there have been living with Muslims for thousands of years, they know who Muhammad is, you understand? So it's more of getting them to pure Tawheed, right? Whereas for this part of the world, it is like they still have this image, as you said, put into their mind that Muhammad was this, and that and the other thing. So it becomes more important for us, I think, that the second approach would be ahsan. That would be probably the better approach, okay? And Allah knows best. And again, the beauty of the Quran too is that you cannot always relegate your dawah to one approach only. And it's a beautiful thing that we have in our own tradition, opinions that allow us to take either one of those approaches, right? Either you concentrate on Allah's wahdaniyah and his uniqueness first, or you concentrate on Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his prophethood and his risala first. Either way is fine. But you kind of have to leave it to the crowd if you're speaking to a crowd, or to the individual if you're speaking to the individual.
Yeah, that's a good point. Depending on the background of the person, like even if you think about the first companions of the Prophet, why did they convert? Was it just the overwhelming nature of the Quran? Was it the character of the Prophet? Was it the message? And I guess depending on your background and your viewpoint, it may be all three, or it may be something that different.
Right. That's why I mentioned certain, again, I'll get the name of that companion, but if you look at the lives of the companions, it's important to look at their lives, because you'll see that to answer what you've just said, every person may have had something very different and particular that brought them towards the truth.
Yeah.
Okay? Every person. And so that again shows us that in order to give dawah, that's why when Allah talks about giving dawah or talking about religion, where we discuss وَجَادِلْهُمْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ وَادْعُ إِلَى سَبِيلِكَ رَبِّكَ بِالْحِكْمَةِ وَالْمَوْعِظَةِ الْحَسَنَةِ. You don't see, it's not like there's a detailed, detailed commandments given to us, like some kind of like, what word should I use here? Like, you're given like instructions to a manual for like a machine, right? Like, here, do this and do this and do this. These are your instructions and the machine will work. Well, human beings are not machines. We're very complex, right? So the way that Allah gives us advice to how to give dawah is so general. It's just give good advice, right? Or argue with them with that which is best. Now, there's no instruction there, or there's no detail there to what is best. Right? You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, yeah.
So what is Allah doing? He's leaving it so open-ended that in order for us to give that dawah, we now have to be very involved in the people we're giving dawah to. That we have to know them so intimately to the point that we know even in individuals, okay, this person has a certain personality trait, or they have a certain viewpoint of the world around them. They're atheists, or they're Christians, or they're Protestants, or they're Catholics even, to that much detail, right? So now when I know that, I know maybe which angle I'm going to come.
Yeah.
Okay, you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That if I'm going to discuss
that's a great point. I mean, the initial spark may be one of a million things, right? Maybe some, when the companions, when the initial Sahabas went and spread Islam, remember what converted some of the people would be the simplest things, the way they ate, the way they did wuzu, the initial spark.
Right.
And yeah, that's a good point.
Right. But I think what's amazing is that although prophets performed miracles, and even the companions, there are many reports enough that again we have to accept it as a reality. Karamatul awliya. Even amongst the companions, there were many miracles, but we find that in very few places did people accept Islam on the basis of miracles.
Mm. Yes.
So what does that kind of teach us? That really what brings people to Islam is not necessarily miracles, but it is the message itself. It is the truth that is contained in wahi, in revelation. So it's the duty of the Muslim to first learn that wahi and that revelation, to first appreciate the truths that are contained in it, and then to be able to transfer that knowledge to other people as best as they can. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That is our duty, basically, to first learn it, appreciate the truths that are contained in it, and then be able to transfer that information to others as best as we possibly can. Because most of the time when people accept Islam, that's what it's based on. Sometimes, obviously, other than just that, we see that people they see the practicality of Islam, meaning when Islam is actually lived, they can see that the fruits of it in terms of our morality. Okay. And also we have to admit there was a time when Muslims were a little bit more better off, that they would also see other things in it, like people see now in the West. Okay. That, well, the West has economic and military power, so let's get on their side. You get what I'm saying? So sometimes also there were times in history and Muslims had that, and then people thought that, well, like Imam al-Ghazali said in his time, certain tribes and people would accept Islam because they saw the benefit in it materially. You know what I'm saying? That, if we become Muslims, we'll live a better life. We have the Muslims have this whole system set up. They're very advanced, and they have sagah, and they have other things, waqf and endowments. We'll live a good life, right? But that, of all things, because zakah can be given, right? It can be given to those people who just accepted Islam, so it makes the incentive to be Muslim a little bit more, if they get some money, right? So, but of all things, that is the least effective. Like, you obviously don't want people to become Muslim for the sake of some monetary gain, right?
Yeah, but even to that point, something mundane as the justice of the economic system in Islam may compel someone.
It absolutely will, and that's a good thing. But the point again there is that we don't want to leave it at that threshold.
Yes.
So in other words, just like a person may be Muslim because they were raised Muslim, the earlier issue, right? They may become Muslim even to marry someone. That happened in the time of the Prophet too. In fact, the hadith إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ was based on on an incident where that was the case. Someone came to Medina, even made hijrah, and became Muslim just to marry somebody, right? So that happened in the time of the Prophet too, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And sometimes people were munafiq, meaning they accepted Islam just to save face, right? And other people would become Muslim, as you said, because they see the justice or the equity of the economic system. There's no riba, there's no exploitation, there's fairness, there's waqf, there's endowments, there's zakah. There's so many benefits to it. So they say, you know what, this looks like a really good thing. Let's accept Islam. So in the beginning, we will always accept people at face value and say, whatever means Allah has used to bring you to the truth, welcome, marhaban bikum. But you are responsible now as a Muslim. Remember, they said, what is the responsibility of every person? You're responsible now as a Muslim to take it further and to learn and to make your Islam sincere and to grow as a believer, because we all need to grow. We have room for growth all the way up into the time of death. Truth be told, which is another subject itself, we even have room to grow after death. The only difference is we have no time anymore to do anything. Right? So anyhow, khair. But the point is that like you can't just leave it at that threshold. But we need to, like, the issue of us as an ummah now, of course, is because the ummah has been put through this turmoil that we're in, that it's very difficult to even bring people towards Islam by any of these means, right? So we don't have an economic system to show anybody. We don't have even, we can say from a moral perspective, how many Muslims do we really, can we confidently say are even showing people Islam from a moral perspective? Okay. And intellectually too, even though we are trying, we still are falling short of producing the types of works that we need to be producing in order to, you know, effectively give people dawah towards Islam. So, but that doesn't mean it's hopeless, because Allah guides people regardless. We see that still people are accepting Islam very rapidly, despite all of our faults. Correct? Right? So there's no reason to be hopeless. It just means that we should encourage each other to do more, because we have a lot more work to do. And the more that Islam will flourish, the more that Islam will be, yani, it will spread. It is the inherent nature of Islam. This is hadith that I used to hear a lot more because of our context in the 90s, let's put it that way, than I do now. And this hadith is that the Prophet ﷺ said, Al-Islamu ya'lu wa la yu'la alayh. Islam will always dominate, and it is never dominated. You see? Islam will always dominate, and it will never be dominated. And so Islam, the nature of it is that its truth will always become apparent, in other words. Okay? So, but the question is whether we become part of the apparatus that makes Islam apparent or not. And I think every one of us should make that intention at whatever level we can. Okay? So we all have something to contribute. We all have something to give. And we have to figure out what it is exactly Allah has given us that we can give to others. But I think it's necessary, and this is why I always talk about these subjects. We didn't even really get into the tafsir of this ayat, alhamdulillah. But those subjects are very important because, as I said, any Muslim who's listening to this, if a person was to stop you on the street and ask you, okay, you believe in Allah, who is Allah? What kind of answer can you give? You understand? If someone was to ask you, okay, you say Muhammad is a prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, why? You see what I'm saying? Like, why? Well, so if we can't answer those questions, then we, all of us, I'm saying in this gathering, and other Muslims, if they're listening, then we have to say, okay, it is an obligation on us to learn about Allah and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam sufficiently, so that if that question is ever posed to us, I can give at least a satisfactory answer.
Yeah.
And not just for other people. What's that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, and you know, just to your other point, I think the more extreme the society we live in becomes, even if someone is doing 50% of their Islam, right, the inquisitive person is going to see those things, right? In the extreme society we live in, they're going to pick up on things. Hey,
Yes.
why does that woman never wear a skirt? Hey, why is that guy taking time out of his day? Where does he go? Why is he always saying something before he eats? Why is he not joining us for drinks after work? Why, I think the inquisitive person, and that's obviously a responsibility on us. But those are things that I think in our society, which right 1,500 years ago would be nothing, maybe become a little bit more pronounced in, our day and age. And some people will maybe pick up on those things.
They will. And what I want to is also to get us to a certain point of cleverness, lack of better words, that when we are asked those questions, we can give a better answer than just like, I'm Muslim and this is what we do. So as an example, there was a sheikh that was once asked by a person that observed how devout they were. In other words, just like you said, they watched them and they saw that, okay, this guy never, he doesn't like flirt with girls. He doesn't go out and drink. He doesn't do this. He doesn't do that. He prays 5 times a day. Like, man, like, when does this guy have fun? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So he asked the sheikh, he says, like, what is all this hard work for? Meaning, why are you depriving yourself of so many, like, in that person's view, good things of life, right? And so the sheikh says, because of my akhirah, my hereafter.
Mm-hmm.
So then the person says, well, what if the akhirah is not true? He said, it doesn't matter. Comparing myself to you, I will still be the winner. He said, how so? He said, because if the akhirah is real, meaning if I'm right and you're wrong, then the answer is obvious, right? That I'll be the winner, okay? But if you're right and I'm wrong, it still will be the better of the two options that if I'm out there partying with you. Why? Because you're going to become miserable when you die because all of your fun is over. And I'll be happy when I die because all my hardships are over. You understand?
Yeah.
So he didn't just leave it like, oh, there's an akhirah and that's it. He tried to appeal to that person's rationale, if you will, at whatever level he could, right? He was clever in the way he responded to that person. And I want to see that in Muslims again. You see what I'm saying? Like, we need to be clever too when we present our arguments and not just say things just so blandly like, okay, it's haram and that's why I don't do it. And that's how honestly, I don't want to be critical here. I'll leave it at this point. And if there's any other questions, we'll stop here. This is why when we teach our kids in that vein as well, like, like we just tell kids that the things are haram and that's the end of the story. So when they go out with their friends and they observe the same things, like, hey, how come Ahmed won't come and do certain things with us, right? And then they ask the kid, hey, Ahmed, why don't you do these things? And then they kind of say, even begrudgingly, like, man, I really want to date, but it's haram and my dad's going to find out and he's going to kill me, right?
Yeah, no, you're right. And the truth is that won't hold up.
It won't hold up.
That may last a little bit, but as soon as you're out of your parents' house for a year, and if that's what was holding you back, trust me, you're going to start to date. You're going to start to drink. So you're right. They have to know the reasoning behind it.
Right. So inshallah, I hope that maybe, again, if we return to that format, we can start giving some certain points necessary for ourselves as parents, and also even that you can use that to teach children and other things and other people that maybe would make the reasoning behind all of what we do a little bit more sensible. And that way you can go from there. You can formulate your answers in a way that, it's clever and people will see in it, not just that you're just devout, but you're devout for, again, the reason why we use the word reason is because there's a reason. You understand? It's not just devoutness because you're just a person who just, you just do what you're told and there's nothing behind it. No, we have reasons behind it and it is reasonable. And that's inshallah, hopefully, inshallah. Any other questions? Because I think we can wrap up now, inshallah.
All right, great. Thank you so much. And I don't think so. Any question? Any question? Anyone? I mean, you guys can unmute and ask question if you want.
Imam, I do have a question. I'm sorry, I took up the entire time today, but there's a question, and it kind of ties in a little bit to what we were discussing today. So, and this could maybe be the subject of a future talk So there's a lot of controversy right now about going to the masjid and praying in Jama'ah 6 feet apart. And I just wanted, and maybe it could be for a future discussion, for you to discuss a little bit the concept of bid'ah. And then also, what do we do when there's so many conflicting opinions regarding a subject amongst scholars, right? So I was looking up this question in YouTube. Literally, I saw 8 pretty prominent scholars that you know, I've listened to in the past, and literally I got 6 different opinions, and you kind of get stuck on you know, what to do, what's the right thing, and when it comes to people at that level of knowledge disagreeing with each other, you know, where does it leave someone like us?
Okay, I'm going to give you a very brief answer because the details of that question can get involved, right? And it's very important to understand that when we come to what is called a fatwa, when we give a religious edict or a ruling, a lot of information has to be brought in front of the individual who's doing that. And the information is not just of a religious nature. Because of this particular question, you also have to look at things like the actual health or that, let's say, the actual danger that is presented in doing certain things. In this case, praying, you know, shoulder to shoulder, foot to foot, right? And that too, you need proper information. And part of that is an issue too, because proper information means that your statistics have to be correct, and you can't always base the danger of something on, you know, these projections that we have of certain organizations. You understand what I'm saying? The mortality rate, even all of these all of that is very complicated. You need to have the right information and the right amount of information before you even can assess what is the actual danger there. Okay, and then from there you take it to the religious text. I mean, how necessary is it to be foot to foot, shoulder to shoulder? And that's a very long discussion. You get where I'm coming, right? So, but the quick answer to your question is this. So for the average Muslim who's not going to be looking at all of that in detail, right? And you have scholars now who differ about what to do, correct? It's a very simple answer. You follow that scholar that you see 2 things in them. The first and the most important thing, of course, is their own qualifications. Are they really a scholar that we should follow to begin with? Okay. And the second is that after knowing their qualifications, looking at their arguments, which of these scholars who are qualified, even if they differ, which of their arguments makes the most sense to you? It's as simple as that. So you have to actually look at their reasoning. In other words, look at their fatwa, look at the methodology that they employed to come to their conclusion, and looking at that, go with what makes your heart feel more content. That person seems to be balanced and well informed, and their conclusion seems also to be balanced and well informed. After that, you're not responsible.
Can you, in 2 minutes, give us your opinion?
I take more of a middle ground. I think that at this point, even though it is not desirable to pray that way, but given the circumstances, we will do it temporarily. Okay. And
so
I
in your opinion, to use the word bid'ah when it comes to this would be incorrect?
Yes, because the issue of joining the ranks also, I don't know of any scholar that says that it's obligatory, except for, I mean, I have to use labels now, forgive me for doing it, but except for the Salafiyun and the Wahhabiyun, they're the only people I know of in the traditional scholarship that says that it's obligatory. So keeping the ranks closed is a sunnah, it's emphasized, okay? I would say maybe it would become a bid'ah if we kept this as a permanent practice, but I don't think there's anyone who's suggesting that we're going to do this permanently, right? You understand? So as a temporary measure, because of certain circumstances, it may not be optimal. It may not be the best way of doing it, but I think it's a little, my opinion about that issue, it's a little extreme to call it a bid'ah, okay? Well, and Allah knows best.
Great.
All right. Any other questions from anyone? I don't think so. I don't see any question in the chat, neither any hand up. So thank you so much, Brother Dickenson and everyone for joining. Jazakumullah khair. I'll share the recording, inshallah.
Inshallah. Du'as
Great,
for
thanks,
everyone.
Imam. Thank you.
Alhamdulillah. MashaAllah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.